Hey everybody, it's your old pal Wood Doofus here. In my last video, I had purchased 3 rough sawn pieces of ash and I spent a long time surfacing the 2 faces of that ash. And if you want to see how I did that, make sure to check out that video. What makes it complicated is that all 3 of these boards are over 12 feet long and I'm all by myself. So to me this is unique because the boards are so long. So my challenge for this video is going to be joining the edges of these boards. And I do not want to have to manhandle these through a table saw or anything like that. I obviously don't have a joiner, so I can't use that. So I'm going to be using devices like my palm router and my circular saw. And I'm going to attempt a few different methods that I have seen and maybe one that I made up. So stay tuned and let's see if any of these work. My first method is going to be this spiral bit with a ball bearing on the end of it. It might be called a flush trim router bit. I think ideally you want to get a bit that has just the ball bearing on the base and not the end, but this is what I got because I wasn't paying attention, so I'm going to attempt to use this. So finding a straight edge is always the first major challenge. I'm using a piece of plywood and I tried to make sure I got the factory edge here because I assume that's going to be the straightest cut I got. Here's a sample of where I used the bit already, and it's just a matter of the ball bearing riding along the plywood that's underneath my workpiece. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a try all the way across. Oh, you always have to make sure when you're setting your workpiece on top of this plywood that you have a little bit of a reveal all the way across, and that way you know you're going to make a straight flat edge, or you hope you do. Alright, so right off the bat I started to have some problems because with a 1/4 inch bit it really only wanted to cut about 1/8 of an inch at a time. So anything thicker than that, it just would get stuck. And so I found some spots and tried it where it was only about 1/8 of an inch or so, and I didn't have too much problems there. But I had to come up with a way to take some of the material off so that it's only a small amount to take off with this bit. So I eventually moved on to the circular saw, and anywhere where the material I needed to remove was thick, I cut it with the circular saw, and then I came back with the router and shaved off the rest of it, and that worked okay, but it was a giant mess and I don't know what I was thinking. You probably noticed by now my totally useless dust collection system. You can tell by the look on my face I look like I'm about to drop a deuce right on my shop floor, but it's really just me getting dust thrown into my face. So I don't know, I should have had the garage door open or something, but you live and learn. Just breathing in all that dust is not healthy. Alright, so this is me putting on some Starbond glue, and then I'm going to come back with the accelerator for that Starbond and put it on my straight edge, and this is how I'm going to clamp my straight edge to the piece without worrying about clamps getting in the way. Although you'll probably notice something else will get in the way later, but here I am straightening it out and hoping for the best. So in just 10 seconds I have my straight edge clamped down with the tape, fully removable, but stiff enough to run the saw. And you see that I have a really long board as always, so I'm going to have to go to the end of my straight edge and line it up with the line I already have, and hopefully continue and keep it straight. So once I got to the end of my straight edge, I had to leapfrog half of it over, keeping one part glued and then gluing the next part down, and I just continued cutting from there. Okay, I'd say this is straight enough to run the other side through a table saw and get them both jointed up. Alright, so for my final effort, I have my third piece clamped in place here with what's close enough to a straight edge, and it's going to operate as my guide for cutting my circular saw right down the seam here. And the idea is that I'm gonna get half a kerf on each board, and hopefully they'll match up after that. And I have both ends. I have a board pinned from underneath so I can pass through here, and they shouldn't move as I go. Now my concern is that there's a good gap in the middle, less of a gap than are at both ends, so I assume I'm gonna have to do at least 2 passes to get the effect I'm looking for, but I'll give it a try. So I think that was a successful process, but it probably would have been better to make 2 or 3 passes to get the seam a little better, but I decided to leave well enough alone, and I went ahead and did a little dry clamp up here to see what the seams look like under clamps, and they seem okay with a little persuasion after the glue up. I'm sure I can get any gaps filled in with some sawdust and glue and some good sanding. So I'm gonna call it a day on this. So my final thoughts on milling your own lumber if you don't have a joiner is just don't do it. I say that mostly because I had to wrestle with these long boards that are between 12 and 14 feet. You might have some success with some of the techniques out there if you have shorter boards that are like 5 feet or less. But if you are buying this at a lumber place and they are willing to charge a fee to have it milled for you, pay that money. It's totally worth it. Like most people, I can't afford a joiner right now. I hope to someday, but until then, I'm not gonna do this again. So lesson learned from your old pal Wood Doofus, but it's important to do things that are hard sometimes so you know if it's worth doing or not. I did learn something, and that's one reason why I always say don't be afraid to be a doofus.